Now correct me if I'm wrong, but when you declutter a space, you want to keep it that way. You do not want all of your hard decluttering work to go to waste. So let's talk about how you can maintain a clutter-free space. Let's go. Hi guys, it's Laura and I help you live a simpler, happier, more spacious life. And the very first thing I want to say is that you are probably not going to be able to do this with your entire house. Why? Because you live there, you are constantly taking things out and putting things back and moving things around, and you're just busy, right? Maybe you've got kids, a job, a chronic illness, maybe someone you love has a chronic illness. We all have our own stuff going on. So for this video, I want you to choose just one spot. That could be the dining table, it could be your nightstand, it could be your office desk, it could be the kids' toy chest. Whatever it is, just pick one space and maintain that one. Now, that's not to say that in future you can't move on from that space, but for now, focus on one, get a handle on that one until kind of maintenance for that is pretty easy, like the upkeep is minimal, and then you can move on to another space. Okay, with that out of the way, first up then is to realize that decluttering is actually only one piece of the puzzle. And you will know this if you have ever decluttered a space only for it to become re-cluttered again. The simple act of just taking stuff off a surface or out of a drawer or whatever is not what is going to get you those lasting results. Instead, you need to look at why stuff ended up there in the first place. Why did that space become cluttered? If you can't figure that out or you don't put any work into that, the space is just going to become messy again. Get to the root of the problem. You know, do papers pile up because they don't have anywhere else to go? Like, do you need a basket or some form of in tray? Do the toys end up everywhere because the kids don't really know where they go back, or maybe the system is a little bit too complicated for them? Try and figure out why that stuff ends up where it does. Getting rid of it is one thing, but keeping it gone is an entirely different story. Lucky for you, that's why I'm making this video, but yes, you really need to think long and hard about why this has become a problem and what the solution would be. Another thing that may prove helpful to you is to actually assign a role to that space. What I mean by that is sometimes we end up dumping things on a surface because we don't really use that surface for anything else. It doesn't have a specific purpose, so it becomes de facto a dumping ground. There are certain spaces in our homes that have kind of designated purposes, so it attracts all the things that are supposed to go there. So when you assign a role or a specific purpose to a space, that can kind of flip your mindset and get you thinking that this is for a specific task, or this is only for a specific type of item, and it can get you out of that mindset that it is just a dumping ground. It is just a place to put things temporarily or even permanently. By saying to yourself, this isn't just a desk, you know, this is my crafting area, or this isn't just a random basket or box, this is where I store, I don't know, towels or scarves or something. When you know what a space or a thing is for, you're much more likely to kind of stick with that. Now, there is a kind of a caveat to that. I will discuss that in a minute, but in general, yes, undefined spaces tend to become dumping grounds. Give them a name, give them a purpose, give them a role. This next one wasn't actually on my list when I was outlining this video, but sitting in this space made me think of it. You can see that I am in the middle of redecorating my office. It's not done, so don't judge this disaster. But if you make a space look nice, you're less likely to mess it up. Hear me out on this one, but if you have a really nice piece of furniture or whatever, you're less likely to just dump junk on it. Am I right? Whereas if you've got a dark corner, and that's why we end up storing things in basements and attics and things, because they're dark, dusty, out of the way places that we don't worry about messing up. So if you have got a space that you have spent time decluttering, then take the extra time to make it look a little bit nicer. Do whatever it takes, whether that be a lick of paint, this is a work in progress, or just organizing things in a nice way, displaying something that you love there, going that extra mile to give it a bit of sparkle can stop you in future from just dumping stuff there. Just some food for thought. But going back to that idea of kind of assigning a role to a space, also make sure that the stuff that you have has a home. So all the books belong in the bookcase, all of the food obviously belongs in the fridge or the freezer or the pantry or whatever. When something has a specific home, it's very easy to put it back there. Surfaces tend to get cluttered because the stuff that's there doesn't have another home. So take the extra time to assign a space for everything. And yes, some things will still come in that don't necessarily have a specific home, or you're just not quite sure. Maybe they're kind of temporary items, you know, a form that you have to fill out, or library books or something, you know, kind of ships in the night, things that are just passing through. For those, assign a temporary spot or a temporary box or something, but already know in your head where everything should belong. Just knowing that and having a dedicated kind of holding station, like a weigh station, is going to stop a lot of that just dropping things on any available surface. Be intentional about where you put things, even if that space is just a for now space. Expanding on that then, give yourself very clear boundaries and clear rules around what kind of is and is not acceptable. Now, if you live with other people, you are going to have to choose your battles on this one, but let me give you an example from my own life. I've shared this story before, but years ago when my husband and I lived in Dublin, we had a shared home office space. It was 2 desks, but they were right next to each other to form essentially one long desk. And because I didn't work there all that often, my husband would just leave his stuff on my side of the desk. But that space, particularly when I was struggling with the transition to motherhood, that space became kind of my sanctuary, and I really felt that it was important for me to guard that space. It was the one space that I had that was just for me. So with that space, I set a very clear boundary, and I gave very clear instructions and very clear rules that if anything were to cross that threshold, I would consider it mine and I would do what I pleased with it, i.e. I would burn it. But it's just one of those things, like that particular space was so very important to me. Now that's obviously kind of a bit of a silly example, but just to give you an idea that if there is a space that is very important to you, set rules, set guidelines for yourself and maybe for others. Stick to them as rigidly as you can, because if there's even one breach, it becomes a free-for-all. If you've got a surface that you're trying to maintain, keep it clear, and then you leave like one mug there, or you know, an item of clothing or something, and you just think, oh, I'm just going to leave it there for now, I'll pick it up later. But that sends out a signal. I don't know what it is, but clutter, it's just like a magnet. It attracts more clutter, and before you know it, your surface is covered again. But if you give yourself a very clear rule, this surface is only for this type of thing, or this drawer only houses this particular product, then it becomes easier to follow. When you set rules for yourself, it's a little bit easier to follow, unless you're a total rebel and rule breaker. But it's just something else to consider. Set those boundaries, be clear with yourself that this is the space that is important to you, and this is the one that you are going to try your best to maintain. No exceptions, no exclusions, no just for nows. Just keep it clear. Speaking of other people then, if you live with other people or you share a space with other people, it's really important to get their buy-in, because different people think and work and organize in different ways. So come together and try and come up with rules and solutions that are going to suit everybody. Now, you may think, certainly I had a tendency to do this, you may think that I'm not going to be 100% happy unless everything is done my way. But I would much rather compromise and be 50% happy than to try and force someone to do something that inevitably they're not going to do, and I will end up 0% happy. You just never know. They might have some good ideas. People can surprise you. Like I said, they bring like a different perspective, so they may be able to share an idea that you had not thought of, or just an idea that would suit them a little bit better, something that they are willing to maintain and keep up, instead of something that you might suggest that just doesn't suit their style of working or organizing. People can see things and do things in a way that maybe you can't. So when you bring everyone together and you brainstorm and you get buy-in, it's much more likely that that space will be maintained. It's much more likely that everyone will want to chip in because it's in a way that kind of suits them. Like I said, you're probably not going to get things 100% your way, but if you get it 50%, it's better than just constantly hitting your head against a brick wall, getting nowhere. Get as much buy-in as you can and get those different perspectives and listen to other people's opinions and ideas and come to a mutually agreeable solution. After that, then it comes down to putting some sort of a system in place. Now I know like putting a system in place sounds really complicated, but it could be just a matter of placing a basket somewhere or a trash can, to collect all the rubbish that tends to pile up in one particular corner. It's just a solution to a problem. It's just coming up with some way to fix the issue. So you've already thought through why this keeps happening, and now you're actually doing something about it. You're taking action to fix that problem. What I will say though, and this is kind of referring back to that caveat that I mentioned earlier, but keep it very simple and don't try to force it. Don't put a system in place that you feel should work or that you would like to work. Keep thinking back to your habits and your routines. Like what is the way that you normally do things? And work with your natural tendencies rather than trying to fight against them. For example, let's say you have a category of items that you would like to live in a closet somewhere or in a particular cupboard or drawer, but for some reason they always end up in the living room. Maybe don't fight that. Maybe just go with it. What is a solution that could work in the living room? It's all about kind of tweaking things and just making things a little bit easier on yourself, not completely overhauling things, just taking what already works, making it a little bit better, and realizing that this for some reason is the way you do things, for better or worse. So it's making that process just that little bit easier, just putting a little bit of polish on it, and maybe over time you could slowly transition away from that. But for now, pick a system that is going to be the easiest to implement. What you do then is you observe the system over time. There's no point just putting a basket down and thinking that's my job done and just walking away. You have to actually see if that system is working. Maybe after a few weeks you think, I did put a basket there, but it just didn't do the trick. The space is still ending up cluttered. Okay, maybe the basket had a lid on it, and that's why stuff is still kind of piling up around it. Or maybe you did get an in tray, but you didn't kind of set aside time on a weekly basis or whatever to go through your paperwork. So just over time, observe how the system is working, figure out what is working, improve on that if you can, and also figure out what's not working, and then kind of make those tweaks and make those changes. It's not about scrapping the system entirely. It's just about making those incremental changes, just evolving it over time. This next one, this is a mistake I used to make all the time. And listen, I'll hold my hands up. Sometimes I still do make it. But if you want to kind of maintain a space, you really need to go the extra mile and get the decluttered stuff out of your house. I don't know how many times I have done a decluttering project, set aside all of the things that I wanted to donate or trash or whatever, and then just left it there, or maybe moved it to my car or something and then just drove around with it for months and months rather than actually bringing it to the charity shop. If you just separate out some stuff, over time, if it doesn't leave your house, it's going to filter back into your everyday life. It's going to end up spreading out again. Maybe even after a few weeks, you'll kind of forget what that pile was. I've done that. Sometimes I will separate things out into different piles. I might have a donate pile and a maybe pile and a trash pile, etc. And over time, I just forget. I'm like, was that the maybe pile? Or what was that pile for? Was that the stuff that I was going to try on? Or, over time, you think in the moment, of course you will remember what all of those piles were for, but probably you won't. Life happens, different things crop up, and your memory is just busy taken up with other things. So when you declutter a space, take the extra time and actually get that decluttered stuff out of your house. Otherwise, what's the point? You've just made a pile of decluttered stuff. You need to get that out of your home. You've probably been in that situation. You know, you move stuff from one spot to another, and then over time the stuff ends up moving from spot to spot, maybe ends up back in the original spot. You just have to get it out. Next one then, so important, and I preach about it all the time, but that is stemming the flow. It means stopping new clutter from coming into your house. There is no point spending hours, days, maybe going through all of your paperwork, shredding all the stuff that you don't want or recycling it, but not actually, you know, getting yourself off junk mail lists, not cutting off all of those catalogs, not canceling all of the magazine and newspaper subscriptions that you don't want. Living a, you know, decluttered, simplified, more minimalist life is, yes, about clearing out the clutter that's currently there, but it's also about not introducing new clutter to the space. So figure out how you can stem that flow of clutter. How can you stop things, new clutter from crossing the threshold into your home? And yes, sometimes we still have to bring in paperwork and things like that, but have bins and shredders and recycling boxes nearby. You know, deal with your mail immediately as soon as you bring it into your home. Various different things like that. Unsubscribe from newsletters that you don't want to receive. There are so many different ways that you can stem the flow of clutter. So once you have got it out of your house, then you want to focus on not bringing more of it in. And maybe you won't want to hear this next one, but you need to have regular tidy up time and get everyone involved. But in order to maintain a space, you do have to put some work in, and it's not going to be the same level of work, but just a tiny 10-minute tidy, 5-minute tidy, even a 2-minute tidy, just to make sure that that space is kept decluttered and is kept clean and tidy. You can assign a specific, you know, space to someone or a specific chore and just make it a habit. Get everyone into the habit of doing it so that it just becomes something that you do on autopilot. Maybe initially it will be a little bit of a chore, but over time there are certain things that you just do because they're just part of your day. Brushing your teeth, having a shower, etc. You don't think of those as chores. They're just things that you do. I would also say if you are getting other people involved, and they should be involved if you do share space with other people, make it so that everyone does it at the same time. And that way nobody feels like they are working and they are putting in effort while someone else has their feet up. That's not going to make them want to continue doing the work. A great time to do it is after dinner, because at that point you have all kind of sat down together, and then everyone gets up and, you know, maybe brings their dirty dishes to the sink. You're already in that mode where you're kind of tidying up. Everyone is doing something together. That's a great time to say, okay, 2 minutes, everyone lost power. What was that about? Oh, okie dokie. Electricity has just decided to declutter itself. Okay, that was weird. Anyway, like I said, yes, after dinner is a great time to do it. Everyone's in that kind of tidy up mode. I'm going to rush through this now in case that goes again. But those are the ways that you can maintain a space after you have decluttered it. Now, if you're looking for loads more decluttering tips on how to kind of clear away a space, how to maintain a decluttered space, then you're going to want to subscribe. And until next time, hopefully I will still have electricity. Go raibh míle maith agam. Agus feici mé sibh go luath. Slán. What was that about?